Dr. KenZoe Brian J. Selassie-Okpe. Now, wait a minute. The last time I don't think the Okpe was there. Did we add that?
So,
what's that?
Okpe got added probably about a year ago.
Okay, that's what it was. All right, so now how do you say it? Okpe. I like to make sure I get all of them right. It's Okpe.
Yes, Okpe.
Okay, so it's Dr. KenZoe Brian J. Selassie-Okpe is an incredibly talented and dynamic critical theories research scholar and professor, guest lecturer, and keynote speaker, as well as nonprofit resource development officer, communications consultant, and public servant professional. As a critical theories research scholar and professor, Dr. Selassie-Okpe specializes in intercultural rhetoric, African American rhetoric, sociolinguistics, organizational communication and behavior, Africana womanism and literary tradition, and nonverbal communication. He has developed critical research focused on Black life dynamics within hip-hop, Africana womanism, and African cultural traditions as they respectively intersect American and Nigerian popular cultures mass media. As a senior consultant for KB and Associates Consulting Services, LLC, Dr. Selassie-Okpe leverages his government sector experience in community relations, grants and resource development, and budget and operations to assist nonprofits, community and faith-based organizations, educational institutions, think tank and research groups, and quasi-government and government agencies with achieving their desired goals. Dr. Selassie-Okpe earned a doctorate of philosophy and communication and culture from Howard University, a master of organizational management from the University of Phoenix, master of public administration from Walden University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Mount Union. He is a 2016-2017 Fulbright Hays Scholarship recipient and currently serves as the Dean of English, World Languages and Cultures, and Communication Studies at City College of San Francisco. Recently, he has served as editor of Dr. Molefe K. Asante's 2019 publication, 400 Years of Witnessing, and he also serves as an advisory board member and acquisitions director for Universal Right Publications. And he is also my fraternity brother, Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and we do serve on the Universal Right Publications LLC board together. Yes. Dr. Selassie-Okpe, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So glad that you joined us. And like I said, I didn't realize you had made that move to the other side of the country. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to apologize that my voice is sort of cutting in and out, a little raspy. I have a slight cold that I'm trying to fight off. And so I actually, really shouldn't have, but I just needed to take cold medicine. And so I was like, okay, I got to be up at 3:55 a.m. I got to be ready for this radio interview. I took the medicine thinking, okay, I'll stay up, I'll just sit, I'll work on my laptop, I'll do some writing, and then all of a sudden my eyes were closed. And so I felt my phone vibrate. It was you, and I was like, oh, it's that time. So I'm like, let's go, let's do it. So then we do what we usually do. We just jump in the mode to get the work done, and that's that. So here we are.
Well, you know what? That last line you just said about jumping in the mode to get the work done is a great segue into my first couple of questions after reading your bio. Because my guest 2 weeks ago, he actually was here with me in the studio, and he had 3 or 4 master's degrees, a doctorate, and was working on his second doctorate. And as I just read your bio there, I'm kind of seeing this same pattern. I'm convinced there's something out there forcing me to go ahead and get my doctorate because I'm around too many people with doctorates now. And so something is moving here afoot. But you're talking about getting the work done. Let's talk a little bit about that. We're talking here, you just earned the doctorate not too long ago, philosophy and communication and culture, but you got the Master of Organizational Management, Master of Public Administration, the Bachelor of Arts. Let's talk about, come on.
Technically, the Masters of, the Ph.D. program at Howard often matriculate students straight through a master's. So you don't receive the master's formally, but you do log those hours to be able to have that master's built into the PhD. So it's quite similar. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is my thing. This is where I'm going, especially since you're into the Africana and the Afrocentric. As you know, many believe that African American males do not get education or get educated. And yet I've had African American males in here with multiple doctorates and masters, so forth and so. So in terms of getting to work and jumping in and doing what we do, talk a little bit about that to, hopefully inspire somebody in the listening audience.
Okay, so I guess I'll start by saying that one of the first things that people will ask you, and the people are the guardians of the gate of the academy. So it's usually a question of, why do you want to earn a bachelor's degree? Why do you want to earn a master's? Why do you want to earn a PhD? And as I've become more familiar with, so I call the academy, academic institution, any collegiate aspect of aspiration, whether it's associates, bachelor's, master's, et cetera, I refer to it as the academy. So when people hear me say academy, just know I'm talking about educational institutions for higher ed and not necessarily K through 12. But one of the things that I always say in response to the question, why are you interested in pursuing this degree, is because I want to.
Exactly.
I have, but part of that response is because I see our white counterparts do whatever pleases them, like whatever they want to do, however they want to do it, whenever they want to do it, to whatever degree they want to do it, and they get it done. And it just sort of is what it is. And so I've really adopted this aspect of feeling entitled to certain things and to not trying to justify my presence as an explanation for why all of a sudden I want to do a master's, PhD, second PhD, or I took the LSAT, so I thought about getting a JD until I realized all of that work was going to be for me just to be a JD because I wasn't interested in actually practicing law. So the catch for me is, and it's specific for me, but it may apply to some other people, I understand how to navigate academic institutions. I'm pretty good at being a college student. I probably used to be a bit better when I was younger in terms of taking direction and all of those things. I mean, I think having a PhD sort of changes your tempo because then you start kind of being able to sort of analyze and critique the lecture style and the information and research and facts of other people. So, it requires a greater orientation in your humility to be able to sit in the classroom and be taught by someone else. Those experiences are still good. But, I mean, overall, I just always sort of knew how to navigate academic, educational space. And because of that, and knowing how to leverage that aspect, I just did what came naturally to me. And so when students oftentimes will say, oh, well, I don't think college is for me. It might not be. And that's just, it's a legitimate response. So why push a triangle and a square peg? Particularly because, and as much as I want to promote an idea that having a PhD is this really phenomenal experience, we need to really talk about the truth of the matter. And the truth of the matter is that if you have to take out student loans to be able to earn that PhD, those loans have to be paid back.
Correct.
And the academy, the educational institutional space of becoming a college professor pays people generally so little for now increasingly so much work.
Correct.
You maybe teach 4 or 5 classes. You have to produce research. It's good for you to be able to go after some grants. You need to sit on multiple committees. You have to then apply for tenure. If you don't get tenure, you get booted out. You got to go someplace else. You got to interview. Your CV has to look great. You're competing against some of the best of the best. Because, see, now it's not just about your everyday common person. It's about people who are also just as educationally and experientially ambitious as you are. So the pool for really convincing people in an interview that you are the candidate becomes a much tougher sell to execute. And so if you're going to go this route and you're going to do it, you've got to really feel like you've got some vested stock in wanting to do it, unless you want to do it just because you want to be able to do it, and that's people's prerogative. But it's generally a pretty large undertaking to have to achieve. But if you're doing it so that you establish legacy and pedigree in your family, which are not things that we often talk about as Blacks, but
Right.
establishing legacy and pedigree are in fact important because it opens up avenues of access, not just for yourself, but for other people in your family or in your, sphere of influence to now be able to acquire some of the social accolades and aspects of social capital, for what it's worth, that help make life maybe a little bit easier. But I just don't want people to be dismayed that, this idea about acquiring all of this education is because I want to be some lifelong student or some aspect of egotism or because the academy is oh so great. In the absence of like what used to be steel workers, like that steel industry, that blue collar industry that really uplifted and upheld American economics. Well, in the absence of that, now it's teachers. And that's why you see teachers so heavily underpaid, so oftentimes overworked. And we're in the age of anti-intellectualism where the aspects of good character, the aspects of good moral value are just upside down. And so left is right and right is left. And you understand the dimensions of which your social system has been corrupted. And until that phases into a different type of paradigm, and when I say paradigm, I just mean a shift in terms of the way that people think about the world, see the world. Essentially, we're getting at some aspects of what American culture is, even though it's still part of white Eurocentric culture. Until you see a shift in that, you're going to be stuck with the same aspects of representative, psychopathic, sociopathic behavior parading itself as normal and functional in this general American society that people are really kind of either reeling against or digging into in support of, because there's now this extreme dichotomy. So, it just depends on what you want to do. I've met people who have a bachelor's degree, no student loan, and then went and got certifications in Scrum, which is an aspect of Agile. It deals with software development,
right,
or project management or what have you. And they clock six figures, and they have great jobs, and they have flexibility, and they work for Visa, and they work for investment companies, and they're doing great things, and they have a quality of life and work-life balance that makes them happy. So I think you just have to really pray to ask a question, meditate, to be quiet, to hear what your aspect of whatever your spiritual deity is as a response, like to you, whatever the response is going to be, and figure it out, and then make your move. But sometimes it just pays to be still in spirit and just be able to figure it out on your own and do what works for you, not do the thing that, Dr. Selassie-Okpe has done, not do the thing that you see Mark Lamont Hill do, like figure out what your rhythm, your vibration in the world is, and do that thing. And so, that's my general overworked answer to the first question. But I'm trying to just make sure I sort of capture the essence.
Yeah, and you actually did in terms of
possible.
Because my guest last week, when we were talking, she had said something that was pointing it to me in terms of how folks, what is your personal definition of success? So for some, exactly what you said, their definition of success may be obtaining the level of PhD. And for others, it may be no degree, but I'm good at what I do, such as a Steve Jobs or what have you. That, I mean, if you read Steve Jobs' book, he literally, for the most part, didn't need to go to college, and he didn't go to college. He kind of went and told the college what courses he was going to take, and they kind of like, well, since you're so intelligent or whatever, we're going to agree with you. So he was one of those that was a little bit different, and there are others like that. And I'm saying all that to say, for every person, it is different. Like for me, if I were to go back to get my doctorate, it would be along those lines of what you were saying in terms of the legacy and the family. And just because I could, just because one day that I was told that I couldn't go to school and I was lynched for reading and all that kind of stuff, that would kind of be my motivation for like, I'm going to do it to throw it in your face, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And because, I just like being in school, like learning, so forth and so on. I wouldn't even care less about if somebody called me doctor or not, unless it was in, proper context, proper setting or whatever. But exactly what you said is exactly ought to be the driving force. And I guess for me, one of the reasons I asked the questions, and let me see how I want to say this. My guess is I don't know, listening audience-wise, if what I'm about to say applies to them or not. And in terms of I'm dealing with the population that I see every day as a school principal in an urban setting school with people that don't even know what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And even when you're trying to help them, they still don't understand the bigger picture. Like what you were talking here is larger global picture. And when you're dealing with folks who can't see that, it's like you're constantly trying to sell this notion of education. And they're constantly looking at you like you have three heads, like I could care less about education. So that's where I'm like, and like you, I tend to agree. I'm not, as a school principal, because it's going to sound counter, but I'm not one that's going to tell every kid you got to go to college. I'm not going to say it. Now, at the same time, what I won't have is a teacher or a guidance counselor telling a kid they're not college material. That's two different things. Telling somebody you're not college material versus, well, if you choose to start your own business, to be an entrepreneur, if you choose to go to the military, if you choose to go to technical school, that's on you. That's different from somebody saying you're not college material.
Correct.
And every school building I've ever led, I made it very clear, if I ever hear tell of a guidance counselor or a teacher saying those words to a child, I'm going after their license. And I make that very clear. But like I just said a couple of minutes ago, there's a difference between that and everybody must go to college. Because you're right. Matter of fact, I just read something yesterday about college enrollment across the board is becoming lower and lower. And my guess is probably because of rising costs. And you hit on another key point. Education in general does not pay regardless of what degree you obtain.
Yeah. The balance of however much you have to take out for student loans against most entry-level positions, it just doesn't balance out. The other piece to it too is that, the rise of social media has now produced behavior outside of electronic media in everyday life. So I'm talking the experience of going onto your phone, accessing an app,
correct,
and just drawing up what you want, or looking at a 15 to 2 minute video clip and then sitting it down, and that's your bit of information. And I'm using bit in a very technical information technology context. But when you step out of that electronic media and you're talking about interpersonal communication on a person-to-person, face-to-face basis, it's a different dynamic.
It really is.
Unfortunately, online institutions as well as traditional institutions that promote face-to-face or hybridized face-to-face and online experiences just don't give you that quick shot dosage of whatever the educational experience is that you're trying to have vis-a-vis your discipline. And so the problem with that is the behaviors that social media creates for people wanting a microwave, really quick, fast experience is not what you get when you show up in a classroom or at most educational institutions. It takes patience.
Correct.
You have to slow walk it unless you know how to navigate the system. So, for example, at Howard University, I finished my Ph.D. in 3 years instead of 6 years. So the average time frame is 6 to 8 years to finish a Ph.D.
Correct.
I looked at my academic program and I figured out that if I followed the pace that was actually set by whomever, set the flow of, course recommendations, the course sequence, well, I would have one lingering class, and then I have to try to find some elective classes. But, that's the business aspect of, well, we got to try to make as much money off of this student as we possibly can. So let's do that. But because I had figured out through some really difficult trials and tribulations that I actually discussed in our previous interview some time ago, so people can go and YouTube, the Reading Circle and my name and your name, and they can find that particular video clip, and they'll hear me talk about some of the hoops that I jumped through for learning how to navigate the educational system at the University of Mount Union, which when I went, it was called Mount Union College. And some negative experiences I had there with, the whole racism and academic advisor telling me that, I wasn't college material,
Oh,
even
there
though I
you
was
go.
graduating in half the time. The point is, if you don't know how to navigate the educational system on your own and have a support system like what Howard University offered by having essentially 3 full-time graduate faculty, Dr. Melbourne S. Cummings, Dr. William J. Starasta, and Dr. Carolyn Stroman, who were they worked well together. You didn't have to be worried about the politics of it all. They were seasoned veteran professors, so their ego was out of it. Because like, I've achieved everything that I want to achieve, so you showing up trying to be great is not problematic, so it's like I can actually lend support to this. So it's not just that I show up and I'm brainy and I just have it all together. Some of it is being at the right place at the right time, which is some spiritual and cosmic grace.
Right.
Some of it is, a large part of it really, not some, is having a support system in place and developing the types of relationships and humbling yourself to the appropriate people that will actually support you and want to support you. And then the rest is just getting up every day and just telling yourself you can do this. Like
Right.
Me and a friend of mine from undergrad, she had said a statement to me that I've just never forgotten. I used to be like, this, I mean, it's so hard. Like, how do I get through this? Like, I'm trying to graduate early. Like, how do I just deal with this? And she was like, Black people generally have attempted to be enslaved by all kinds of people, from whites to Muslims in the Arabic, Middle Eastern arena. Like, just Black people have caught it hard. And I'm saying Black people racially just to catch everybody in the diaspora, but, Africans particularly during that time, wherever they were in the world. And she said, but, at the end of the day, if we can survive enslavement and still exist as royals and still reorient family, she was like, this collegiate experience, like, we can do anything for a little while. And I just never forgot that. Like, if you Black, you can do anything for a little while. So I used to just chalk most things up to the game. Like, all right, so it's either this or doing something that I really don't want to do. Like, be yelled at by some 9-to-5 boss that's first about clocking in 5 minutes late. Like, I'm not, that can't be my reality. So I got to do what I got to do. And so it is, and I'm still in that mode. I'm actually trying to get out of that mode because it feels like a survivor mode, still oriented in the trauma of being fearful of failure or not succeeding in whatever context. I don't even know that I have a definition for it. I'm just doing because I'm so scared to not do anymore that stuff will just fall apart. And all I have now, with the absence of so many people that have loved me all my life as elders passing away, all I got is me. So it's like I got to just keep running as fast as I can run, hoping that I can do some of the things that I enjoy doing while I run, but I just can't stop. And so I'm now at this phase in my life where I'm trying to kind of work myself into a state of just saying, well, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to do this.
Right.
I am going to do this because I do want to do this. And then being clear about what I still have to do, what I got to do. And
I know that's right. So when I look in your bio, we just read there, Dr. Selassie-Okpe specializes in intercultural rhetoric, African-American rhetoric, sociolinguistics, organizational communication. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's going on? What for our listening audience, what is intercultural rhetoric and African-American rhetoric?
Okay, it's a fancy way to say I basically examine the way that languages form and function in a variety of different cultures. So let me give you an example. So if you recall, maybe back in the early 90s, hip-hop heads will kill me for saying this because I probably am getting it wrong. So be gracious, forgive me. But the early part of the 90s and early 2000s, you had the rise of like Will Smith talking about getting jiggy with it. And you had Lil Wayne talking about bling bling.
Right.
Right? So those are, I mean, black people are just phenomenally, exceptionally brilliant when it comes to forming new acronyms, language function, language form, sound, etc., to express aspects of different experiences that they believe they're having, which is really talking about their culture, like African Americans particularly, but more broadly, Afro-Caribbean, Africans, like, I mean, just across the diaspora, black people are creators. It's the God force that's in the spirit, the wholeness of black people.
Right.
And they actively do it in such a way and with such ease that they don't even realize that it's actually a God force to be creators in such a dynamic and powerful way, particularly with the spoken word. And so when I'm talking about bling bling, when I'm talking about getting jiggy with it, I'm talking about a way that the language formed through somebody's idea, right? It was a thought that somebody uttered into a word to accommodate the experience they witnessed they were having. And so they saw this experience where the diamonds like shine brightly and just said, so let it be that I will call this thing bling. It seems like a silly thing. It seems like I'm over exaggerating and hyping black people up. But the truth of the matter is, what other aspect of divine creation do you have than to be able to name a thing or name yourself, right? Like, or to name your children, or to be a part of a legacy name like Selassie or like Okpe. Like, it's significant. So the context around sociolinguistics is to look at the social or sociological and linguistic, which is the language function, and how they come together for people to not only be able to speak words, but live through the words that they speak. So it's the orientation predominantly of words that are especially verbs, right? Like to do, like to take action, to have force in the world. The intercultural piece, so that's sociolinguistics. The intercultural piece is really talking about how different cultures come into existence to communicate with one another. And so, for example, when when black people and white people racially, I'm talking just general race,
right?
When they communicate with each other on a cultural level, and the ethnic identity could be a cultural level too, but that's too much into the weeds for this conversation. But racially, when black culture meets white culture, it is an intercultural experience. And one of the things that I said when I taught at Allen University, which, oh my God, like shout out to Allen University, it's where I really had my first full-on faculty position, and it was phenomenal. Like,
all right now.
I mean, it's phenomenal in what I chose to make it. It had its challenges, but you know, the administration there, like for example, Dr. Charlene Spearin, who's the vice president of academic affairs, they really gave me space to just be me, and I'm always gonna big up anybody who allows me space to be me.
I know that's right.
Learn my lessons, get it right, get it wrong, but to be me and to still be able to be employed and be paid, not suffer consequence or shame, but to always have grace to be able to grow. I'm always going to big up that place. I'm always going to remember that place. I'm always going to remember Benedict College. And more important than just remembering those spaces, because like at Benedict College, you had like Assistant Dean Faye Hardy, and at the time it was Dean Tanya Bryce, who's now at Bowie State University doing phenomenal things. But you just have these prolific, really great folks who help sort of raise you up. But in those spaces, I would oftentimes have to remind, particularly at Allen University, the faculty that this is this is a historically black college. And if you are white at this school, for you to impose your white dominant culture as a standard on black students who are probably not even really clear about the distinctions between black and white culture other than vernacular. When people say like, oh, you sound white, like, oh, you sound like you sound
Right.
white. Like, that's a way of trying to denote like, oh, this is a cultural linguistic, shift. This is a different sound. But when they're trying to articulate those things, I'm like, you can't show up at a historically black college imposing white culture on black students. Like, you a guest in this space. Like, let's be clear about that. You a guest in historically black college space. The same way that when I'm at CCSS, I get treated like, and I'm being straight up, I get treated like, and I am clear about the fact that I am a guest in white space at a predominantly white institution, and the institution can shift to being predominantly Hispanic or whatever the case may be, but the consciousness that accommodates the culture, the way of being, is predominantly white. And I'm clear about it. I understand it. I understand that we are making strides to try to create aspects of racial and educational equity in those spaces, which is why I'm in that space. I love the school. It's a great school. I encourage people to come, check it out, go to the website, register for classes, all of those good things. But I'm big on people understanding where their sphere of influence by virtue of their culture should be. And so that's intercultural communication. It's the ability to be aware of the cultural context by which people communicate their thoughts, ideas, and their behavior. So, generally, I encounter white men and women who operate with a high degree of passive-aggressive behavior. And that passive-aggressive behavior is usually very antagonistic. So it's like, you keep egging at a person, and then when a black person get upset because a black person generally operate in assertion or aggression, and you actually do something to the person, then the white person like, oh, why did you do this to me? And like, I wasn't bothering you. It's like, oh, you were being passive aggressive. Like it has that nuance of being interpreted in a number of ways.
No, you're absolutely right. And the potential for that happening in an educational setting is real. Matter of fact, oddly enough, I just had this conversation with a teacher the other day, and she really did not realize that she was antagonizing or was antagonistic. And, she almost got offended whenever I said, no, you need to understand how you're being antagonistic in terms of how the child is receiving it. Like once you've reported what the child has, whatever the infraction is, let it go. Don't stand there and keep nagging and hanging around to see what's going to happen. Because that's where the antagonism comes across.
Absolutely. And that's a passive-aggressive behavior. Sometimes it transitions into aggressive behavior, but
right.
It usually starts out as passive-aggressive behavior. And in some instances, I recognize that when we're talking about these instances of police brutality, where it's predominantly, white officers harassing black and brown people.
Right.
In all respect to brown people, but let's be clear. This whole new thing where people are like, oh yeah, people of color. Like, well, all people of color ain't going through the same thing that black people going through, and so black people got to stop loving everybody else more than they love themselves. I'm black. I'm happy to be black. I'm African. In the context of being in America, but I am African and African-centered, and there are no questions about that. So my foremost concern is my black family, my black community, my black nation, and our black lives. Like, and people don't have to worry about me mincing no kind of words about it. It is what it is. Is it a political statement? It could be if you want it to be, and that just is what it is. Do I have a regard for other people? Sure I do. Like, I'm compassionate. I'm a good person by general standard, but do I prioritize the resources and attention by which I give? Absolutely, because there's not enough to go around.
Absolutely.
There's not enough.
There's a couple of things as you were talking that came on. One is comical, at least to me, but the other is a book that I started reading. I haven't finished it yet. The author is Christopher, and you've probably heard or seen it or read it yourself. The author is Christopher Emdin, E-M-D-I-N, and the title of the book is For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, and the rest of y'all too, Reality Pedagogy and Urban Education. And that gets at some of the stuff that KenZoe was just talking about. The other thing that made me laugh when you were talking about the hip-hop generation, my sister and I, my sister's a comedian. And so back in the day, whenever that song, Hoot, There It Is, was out, And and like you were saying, in terms of it being innate, there's just some things rhythmically, and we can hit words and things in a certain way that cannot necessarily be copied or understood. So when "hoot, there it is" was out there, the way the syncopation and the beat on that song is, my sister would always laugh. She says, I can't imagine white folk. I know they're sitting there like saying, "Hoot, there it is." Hoot, hoot, there what is. And right. And so it's that same thing you were just talking about, bling and getting jiggy with it. It is culturally, and it is a whole different language that, again, and you made that reference in terms of sounding white. I've always hated that statement because for me there's some fallacies in there. The first thing is I'm not willing to give anybody, white folk, anybody, that much credit because what they do and what they speak is not always correct.
They are not the standard.
Right, exactly. So whatever it is, it has its standard, it's right, it's wrong. It's not necessarily racially or color based. So the fact that you would tag doing something in its proper, a quote unquote proper manner to a race, I've always had an issue with that. So when I speak proper or I speak well or I'm articulate, I don't want that ascribed to another race. No, I'm articulate because I've learned, I've studied, I've practiced. I don't want to hear this nonsense of you sound white or you talk white.
Let me offer something for consideration. So in the context of sociolinguistics and intercultural communication, right? You have this circumstance where we're even more detrimental to sounding white or in it being problematic or not being problematic is the circumstance of this idea about what's proper. So
correct.
When people are when people try to articulate, so I'm always trying to really listen to figure out what are people trying to express either verbally or non-verbally, right? And so verbally, when black people say, "Oh, you sound white," it's about the proper enunciation of English words. Because, for all intents and purposes, I always argue that English is, in fact, a second language for black people.
That's correct. I'm with you.
Let's just be really clear about that. Because, Trisha Rose, Geneva Smitherman, several great scholars have written extensively about these aspects of linguistic adaptation and things of that nature, which get into Creole Pidgin, all of the stuff that's too heavy for just radio conversation.
Right.
But I'm just putting it out there so that if people hear it and then they Google or whatever, you hear the word and you can, you'll figure it out. So I just want to drop breadcrumbs along the way, but get to the bigger chunk of stuff. The bigger chunk here is to say there is no such thing as speak proper. Because when you're talking about black linguistic function, especially for black Americans, you're talking about a majority of Americans that have come out of aspects of West Africa continentally. So if you come out of aspects of West Africa, there's research by Trisha Rose, Geneva Smitherman, that actually speaks to this idea of not using the ER sound in forever, and instead orienting back to a West African dialect that then puts an A at the end of the word, so it's forever. And so depending on who you're speaking to and the point that you're trying to make and how you are trying to communicate determines what's proper or not proper. So, if your audience wants a proper, so if I say to a student, provide me a proper English, Anglo-Saxon, Greco-Roman, Eurocentric verbal delivery, then they would say, I am going to forever be appreciative of everything that you have managed to do for me.
That's right.
But if I say, just spit and be 100 with it, then they'll be like, yo, everything that you did for me all my life is it's everything. And I appreciate that. So you got that. You got appreciate. You have all of the verbal acrobatics that make black linguistic function, black linguistic language form great, phenomenal, desirable, tasty. White folks will get black people to hate their own language and then turn around and be putting it on prime time TV. So people on Friends and Seinfeld be trying to use our language after they dogged us
Right.
out and told us we stupid for using it. But then we stop using it, and then they make it their own and act like they had always come up with it. Like, I'm waiting for Michael Jackson to historically be referred to as a white man so that they can say that it was, Elvis and Michael Jackson that really spearheaded everything that was always, proper and white about R&B. It's that foolishness, because I'm real clear history does repeat itself. So when you're talking about George James' stolen legacy, when
That's
you're talking
right.
about the work that we're trying to do at Universal Right Publishing in terms of putting out this scholarly work of really an anthological reference book that lists all of the scholars that a person could ever want to think about that are African-centered only. Nobody Eurocentric. Appreciate the diversity, appreciate like the equity in diversity and all of this other stuff, but sometimes we just need some stuff just for us. And right now there's nothing out there. So I.L. Sakai and I are working together to be able to produce this scholarly publication for scholars in the academy, like in educational institutions that
Right.
are higher ed educations, but for anybody who just wants to be like, look, I don't want to go to college, but I do want to be put on so that if a white person come at me, I know some black scholars who have studied and spit that game and that will break this down as an everyday conversation that I could use to help survive, so that when I see a white person being passive aggressive, now I know how to call it out. Now I have techniques for how to manage that particular white person so that I can maybe de-escalate. Or if I engage police officers, I know how to code switch into that white vernacular, that white proper sound that disarms them from being, so heightened in this aspect of psychopathy, because I think it's an aspect of psychopathic behavior that they would just see black folks like, a little 4'2" black person and be like, oh my God, they were like this really big black person. They were coming at me with a weapon, and that's psychopathic delusion. Like, and until we start calling some of this behavior out for what it is, like it continues to just traumatize us and not get to the heart of what we're really dealing with. And not, to be fair, there are some black folks that have adopted aspects of psychopathic delusion.
Correct.
They so want to be white, stuck in their black body, that even though they got black skin,
Correct,
they still got white consciousness. And so, we say it a different way when we say, all my skin folk ain't my kin folk.
All right, now.
Same thing. I'm just saying it in an academic way. So we could flip this thing every which way, but we always getting back to this idea that, for the longest time, the likes of Molefi Asante, Marimba Ama Mazama, Clenora Hudson Weems, I'm trying to just like rattle them off, like Asa Hilliard, Wade Nobles, Siri McDougal, Marimba Ani. Golly, Marimba Ani. I like carry one of her books, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, around with me everywhere I go. That's a 65-page book read that I would do like anytime, because it's about spirituality. It's about black spirituality. It's just phenomenal. But Amani Shaketi Ani, like just several scholars that are just out there. The work of like Dr. Chick Smith, like, Willie J. Thompson Jr. Like, I mean, these are folks that really put it out there. Terrell D. Brown has publications out of Howard University. Like, just, Gerald Taiwo Harris. Like, it's a litany of folks that are just really trying to write and produce information, literature that helps black folks figure out how to navigate this world. And it's not just against white folks, because trust me when I say, if we resolve the racial issue with white folks, there'd be a new racial issue with regard to how the Chinese perceive us, or how other Asian-oriented groups of people, by virtue of their geographic location and culture, perceive us, how Middle Easterners perceive and treat us, because there are some issues that are still going on that really don't get addressed by virtue of how Middle Easterners that can pass as fair skinned treat Middle Easterners who are otherwise dark skinned and of a particular Afro or Afro-Asiatic descent. So, we have to be vigilant as black folks, particularly black folks with African legacy, and heritage on all fronts at all time. And I'm just always real clear about it. And while white folks are usually in my crosshairs to just watch out for because they're the dominant culture, because we really have to defend against white supremacy, there are some other supremacies on the rise that are problematic. So if people are trying to, I hope I'm not talking too fast either, but if people are trying to really figure out like what's next, research a professor out of, I think he's at University of Mexico or University of Hawaii. I can't sometimes keep track of where people are moving around to, but Yoshitaka Miike. So Dr. Yoshitaka Miike framed Asia centricity after Dr. Molefi Asante's Afrocentricity. But yet again, you see how black folks like, we do the thing, and it's, oh, wow, I like that thing you just did. Big up to you. I want to do that thing too. And I'm not mad at it, but I'm always going to still give credit back to the source.
And that's, because I was letting you go, and I wanted to, because there's several things you said that I was trying to take mental notes of what I wanted to jump in on as you were going. And one of them is, first off, for those in the listening audience, if you've just joined us, and I hope you've been with me since 6, but certainly since 7:30, since Dr. KenZoe and I have been talking, my guest is Dr. KenZoe Brian J. Selassie-Okpe. And we're talking about a plethora of issues, particularly in the African American community. And there was something that you said there that, again, came to mind when that whole notion of you were, and I'm definitely going to have to run the tape back in that segment of how you said that, right before you were talking about the whole Michael Jackson Elvis thing, about how, for the most part, you make us feel as if we're stupid for doing it, then you take it away, and then you take it and act as if you were the one who invented it to begin with. It was something along those lines. If you've seen the play or the movie Dreamgirls, there's a whole segment on that in there about the music. And back to that whole the dialect or the rhythm, they do a whole play on that about how the song sounded one way as an African American sang, and how when it was taken, it was recorded another way for the Caucasian community. So they do a whole play on that as a part of Dreamgirls. But you're absolutely right, and you just said it again, between the Asiacentric? How'd you say it versus the Afrocentric?
So Asian centricity versus
Asian centricity. So it's that same concept, just like you said. And the other thing that leaped out at me as we went around the world, that it always is amazing me that just because of the color of our skin, that it's always issues going on. So if you're a darker shade, the darker you are, the more the issue.
Yeah. And the irony is that actually the darker you are, and I'm generally like this cocoa brown something or another, but the darker you are, the more melanated you are, which actually gives a variety of different health benefits.
Correct.
And that's not to disparage, because I'm not trying to get into this whole spectrum of, dark skinned people are better than light skinned people, and light skinned people are better than dark skinned people. Like, we all black. Like, we gotta
right.
let's get that together first. We all black. Now, beyond racial blackness, people who live in community, so like in Nigeria, for example, much less maybe the better part of the whole of Africa, but that can get spotty. So I want to just like zero in. So like in Nigeria or in Cameroon or in Senegal or in Congo, for example, when there's a predominant representation of black folks, you ain't got to talk about blackness, because it's like, blackness and compared to what?
Right.
Like,
right.
so don't get mad at Africans when they come to the U.S. and they like, I'm not black. It's outside their scope of consciousness. It's like,
correct.
Black for what? Like, I am Nigerian. I am, Senegalese. I am Cameroonian. Like, they orient into a national identity, or more importantly, they orient into their ethnic identity.
Correct.
So I'm Idoma. I am Yoruba, I am Igala, I am, Igbo. Like, it's the pride of the people you come from, which is still about orienting more into legacy and lineage. And for those that are maybe like into like, Christian biblical principle and all of these things, and they're like, well, I'm just of Jesus, and this and the others, like, well, even Jesus spoke to the lineage by which he came.
Correct.
Like Boaz, Menelik, Naomi, Solomon. Like, I mean, he spoke to that lineage, David, etc. So when you're talking about this context of, trying to always orient outside of being African. Like, all of them, like, you ain't meeting no white guy named Boaz. Like, what? Like, Naomi? Like it just speaks to this idea that people are always trying to escape blackness by any means necessary.
Right, and it's funny you mentioned
embrace
that whole notion of if you're in Africa, they really don't realize, and you're the second person in 3 days I've heard say that. My daughter recently started watching the comedian Trevor Noah. And I walked in the house the other day, she was watching Trevor Noah, and he was doing his routine. And exactly what you just said is what he was saying in his comedy routine. They don't know what the term, matter of fact, I believe if I heard the skit correctly, if I heard his routine correctly, he was saying the definition of nigger over there meant give.
Yeah.
He was getting into the, like, we don't understand that word. We don't understand what that means because over here the definition of that is give. And they didn't, like you just said, they don't get into black because they don't know what that is. Everybody over there black.
But remember that's sociolinguistics. That's the form, right? It's the word. The word is the form, and then it's the function. It's what is the word intended to do or produce or convey in the culture. So nigger in South Africa is formulated to produce a particular type of function, which is giving. Right. Or to give.
Right.
So geographic location and culture matter when you're talking about word use, because words can mean different things to different people. Like even the use of nigga, not really fond of saying the word, but the use of that particular pejorative term turned positive between black people is about a dynamic of what that means between the two of us, which is why, frankly, white folks just can't say it. Like, I don't want to hear white folks say it. Now, if you want to say it in your own private space,
right.
So you do what you do, because what I don't know, I just don't know. I mean, that is what it is. And sometimes it's better for people to just, keep their private thoughts to themselves, even though people's private thoughts often cause me pause.
Right.
But I try not to really delve into that, because then it starts getting into other aspects of mental psychological perversion, and then you start making assumptions. It's a nasty thing. But generally, that is sociolinguistics. When you're talking about how a word takes form and how it has meaning and function in different social settings shared between two or more people, because that's culture. When two or more people share something together, they develop culture.
Absolutely right. And that other thing, whenever you were doing the answer a couple of minutes ago that leaped out at me, it took me back to where you started the interview in terms of why you wanted to go to school, because I want to. And you were saying other cultures do what they want to do when they want to do it. And never has that been more seen than what we're seeing now in our current leadership in Washington. Donald Trump is doing what he want to do because he want to do it. Simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, but what else? Because I don't really understand what people don't quite. I don't know what people expect. Like I don't know if they expect him to maybe do something other than be a white male who has been raised in white supremacist privilege.
Correct.
So it's like his behavior makes sense given his psychopathic context.
Correct.
Like, it just is what it is. And yes, I call 45 a psychopath. Like he demonstrates psychopathic tendencies, but that's from an African-centric perspective.
Correct.
From a Eurocentric perspective. So when I shift the lens, so if you imagine shifting culture, like when you're at the eye doctor and they're like, oh,
right,
can you see the word better if you look at it through lens A or B? Like A, like 1 or 2, like, so you're shifting lenses. When you understand the dimensions of culture, you can shift lenses to be able to see how other people are functioning and what culture they're functioning through. Because if they're functioning behaviorally through the culture, which is part of, innately becoming a behaviorist, because then you start to study and understand aspects of the psychological dimensions of behavior. But when you understand that, then you also understand the psychological context by which a person's consciousness exists.
Correct.
The consciousness and the culture usually go hand in hand.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. The other day, someone posted on Facebook, all right, give one thing. If you could praise Donald Trump, what's the one thing you would praise him for? And the answer you just gave, and I didn't type and I started to because I didn't want to get deep, was just that. To be honest with you, Donald Trump did not change. Donald Trump has been who Donald Trump has always been. I could see it if he portrayed one way and then changed after he was elected. But that is not the case. And when you hit it right on the head just now in terms of which lens are you looking through, he's doing exactly what he's always been doing.
Yep, absolutely. Which to me, and people are going to be like, oh, no, I don't like Dr. Selassie-Okpe. Like, oh, like, make him go to now. Like, from now on, I'm going to just call him KenZoe Brian when I see him. Like, be real informal with me. But, I mean, I think that's the benefit of having Donald Trump in office. I mean, to be quite honest. Like, and no, I'm not saying that I voted for him. Not that
no, I know exactly what you're saying.
I didn't vote. But I'm saying my perspective was, if Hillary does not win, because I didn't believe in this idea that, you know, it's like, well, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. I think about this from a much greater depth of dimension and perspective. So if my existence in the world has spiritual influence on the things that I encounter, then it means that when I cast my ballot, when I cast my vote for somebody, not only am I doing it carnally, physically in the world, but I'm also doing it spiritually, because I'm then saying, I give my spiritual consent for this person to be Lord, to govern over me, and to be subject to the principles by which they will govern.
Right.
So for me, there is no, oh, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Like, Hillary was a bad option because when you tell me that you see me as a super predator and all other black people as a super predator, you mean it. It was a slip of the tongue, but you meant it. And there ain't no accidents about that. No amount of good legislation that you're trying to create is going to change the fact that at your core of your white female privilege, you see me as a super predator, which still makes me other to you. So you ain't ever gonna really be an ally. But at the same time, Donald Trump is upfront about not being no ally. It's clear he ain't really no ally unless you somebody who's so dislocated from your orientation of black cultural consciousness that you like, oh well, white is right and it's just better, and that's just the way that I'm gonna swing. But the benefit that I think Donald Trump had in coming into office was that he provided, this is America's last chance to be able to see what white supremacy is. He is the physical manifestation of everything that scholars and people who are just knowledgeable and well-read have talked about white supremacy is.
Correct.
It's a quintessential white supremacist male.
Correct.
And that just is what it is. Like, if you haven't figured it out by now, it won't happen, and white supremacy will likely continue for another X amount of years. And I'm not trying to speak a number and then
right.
a whole group of people.
But I mean, you're absolutely on point. And again, you have to be able to think in a different way other than on the surface. You have to go a little bit deeper. And you're absolutely, that's why when people look at me, I said, well, the only thing I could say, if I had to answer that question about what praise I would get, is because he didn't put on any airs. He did not fool anybody. For the folks that decided to vote for him, they knew what they were voting for. At least they ought to have known, because the same Donald Trump that I've always known was the same Donald Trump he was on the campaign, the same Donald Trump he is in the White House. So it's not like he put on an act. That's one thing. Had it been an act, that would have been something different, but he didn't do that. If you're just joining me, my guest is Dr. KenZoe Brian J. Selassie-Okpe. We have about maybe 20 more minutes left before I have to relinquish the microphone to Barry with the Naked Brunch. He'll be coming on shortly, but we've been having an intellectual conversation this morning because I have another intellectual guest with me, and we are getting into some deep discussion in terms of our culture. Now, I heard you reference that you and I are working on a project. That project is not done yet. It's not published.
No, it's not published yet. Actually, we have a call out for people to submit nominations. So the way this works is this. Io and I had this conversation about, the limited access of a source book that could list a series of scholars in all academic disciplines, old, new, etc. And so we started coming up with these ideas about, who will be interested in the book and what would its use be for. And so it's generally for scholars who are trying to become African-centered or trying to access African-centered information, and not just scholars in the academy, but I'm saying you can be a scholar both formally in an academic institution, like at a school, or you could be a scholar that's just like, I'm not going to school, but I'm going to be well-read and I'm going to know what it is, so it just is what it is. There are all types of scholars the same way there are all types of black folks. But
Correct.
we wanted to produce something that they could access so that we could acknowledge ourselves and our work, because oftentimes we don't do well in terms of being accepted into the ranks of, really well-known, well-circulated publications that are usually funded by Eurocentric entities or, produced and published by Eurocentric entities. And the black entities that exist, like your, Journal of Black Studies, the Western Journal of Black Studies, et cetera, Howard Journal of Communication, they are oftentimes bombarded with so many great research articles that it's difficult to just kind of get in where you fit in. So you've really got to try to push, write, rewrite, et cetera. But, I'll tell you, the honest to God truth is that, one, we want to give acknowledgement to scholars who are in the field and really trying to do their thing and promote us and promote being able to access our information. But the other piece is, if somebody had told me that being a PhD would involve so much thankless, compensationless work, like, this is foolishness. Like, I mean, people are probably like, oh my God, like, I can't believe he is on the radio saying this, cut his mic off. But it's insane the amount of compensationless work that people do just to be able to get tenure and feel like they have some sense of social acknowledgement, in the sphere of being prestigious. Like, I'm not that egotistical. I'm not really on it. Like, bully for the people that got it, like, great for you. But I just am not like that. And the problem with sometimes submitting to a lot of journals is that when you've taken the time to develop your research as a scholar, and I'm saying as a PhD scholar, which generally means you got approved by a committee that you know how to engage in scientific research that produces new knowledge, right? That pushes the threshold, that builds upon a body of work that already exists or develops a new body of work that you want to exist. And so I understand the peer review process, but oftentimes what you see and what you read in these journal publications is some highly altered, augmented, alternative reality to the overall research that actually got conducted. And so the fact that a lot of research really gets watered down by all of these varying peer-reviewed voices trying to make it what they want it to be as best as they can understand it because they are on a committee and they want to do reviews and they want to have feedback and, every scholar want to be the scholar and they want to be like, by the time you get done with all of that, you're dealing with something that's just not even as powerful as it probably was at its inception. So I oftentimes try to write to people and just say, this is a great article that you published, but like, where's the original manuscript? Like, what did you say for real?
Right.
And so part of the process of this idea about publication, which is why I love universal right publication, is that it really speaks to not tampering with people's voice. So like the way that I'm talking now, like I'm KenZoe Brian.
Right.
Yay, I got a PhD. Yay, I got all this education. If you want one, go get one. That's great or whatever. But I'm always just going to be KenZoe Brian until I transform into something else. And that transformation is just evolution.
Right.
Because I want how I call myself. I want how I see myself in the world to be representative of the experience that I'm having. And again, it goes back to all types of sacred texts. So you look at the Quran, you look at the Bible. As people started to shift in their experience and grow in their spiritual understanding in the world, they usually augmented and altered their name to reflect this new state of being.
That's correct.
So a caterpillar ain't gonna always be a caterpillar once it becomes a butterfly. Once it goes through that metamorphosis and that transformation, you calling a caterpillar is calling it its name at its origin, which is okay and can be a powerful thing. But to recognize it as it is means that you got to really call it by its representative.
That's correct.
To get its current attention. And when people don't really understand that, then it always tells me that they don't really understand these aspects of African spirituality. They don't understand aspects of African-centered perspective on sociolinguistics, intercultural communication, or the behaviors that come alongside how we communicate, how we think psychologically in terms of consciousness that accommodates the culture.
That's interesting, because now what came to my mind when you said that was, would a butterfly answer to the name caterpillar? That's interesting. So I tell you what, I'm looking here in the bio again. I see you were the editor to Molefe Asante's publication. Do you have any publications like your books out there at all? Because at this point, I turn the mic over for you to promote any of your work, any book signings. I know we just talked about the work that you're working on, but anything that you want to promote, we had a couple minutes to do that. You could say anything with the exception of a dollar amount, but I'm going to turn the mic off. And in terms of shout outs and promos and your books or whatever that you're doing, this is the opportunity to do that.
All right. So I have a book chapter in Dr. Daryl Taiwo Harris's book. It's called News Chaser. My chapter is I believe it's chapter 5. It's called The Art of White Nationalism, Yorugu Rhetoric. It's the rhetoric of psychopathy and savagery. And ironically enough, I go through the entire lineage of white culture from Shakespeare and the different schools of thought vis-a-vis like Diogenes and Socrates and Aristotelian, Aristotle, into like Shakespeare's Macbeth and Othello, into tweets by Donald Trump to be able, like Adolf Hitler, et cetera, to be able to really articulate this aspect of what they have represented as political rhetoric, which is really psychopathy and savagery. Like they promoting for people to be psychopaths and to be savage about it. Like, promote this aspect of psychological delusion, and if people don't buy into it, kill them or harm them. Like, that's savage, right? So I'm real clear, and I base that theoretical framework on Marimba Ani's dissertation and book called Yorugu, which speaks to this aspect of spiritual incompleteness. Now, white people do have a spirit, but, the Dogon tribe of West Africa believe that they are spiritually incomplete. So check out that reading. But that's my chapter. It's chapter 5, News Chaser. I'm working on this publication. The name isn't being dropped yet, but go to submissions at uwpbooks.com. I hope I got that right. I might be slaughtering it. But nevertheless, Google Universal Right Publication or Universal Right Books Publication, and you will be able to access the submission page and submit a nomination for whomever is the scholar that you believe is African-centered and worthy of being a part of this particular anthology and being listed in this anthology. Not only will that person that you recommend be listed, but you will be listed as well for recommending the person. So you at least get your name in print. So big up both ways is duality. But otherwise, I'll tell you the honest to God truth. Short of an article that I did with Dr. Terrell Brown out of Howard University, who was at FAMU and now I think has transitioned through a fellowship. I don't actually have very many other publications. I have manuscripts that are really sitting on my laptop, but I'm so sensitive and I take so seriously my ability to try to be articulate,
right?
And not articulate in verbal delivery of perfection,
right?
But I want to make sure that when I get ready to produce something, so I submitted one article. It was about these aspects of non-heterosexuality. So let me say it differently. It's about like this aspect of how I view this notion of being black and being gay in black community, because it's become more problematic than it really should be for black community. And people are being cast out, and that's not what we really used to do. Like, Big Mama would just recognize that it was something different about that person, but would just say, just leave them be. and he or she would be usually the person that helps still be a surrogate parent to the nieces and nephews, and also take care of the parents in lieu of brothers and sisters or siblings of any sort getting married and leaving the house. And so everybody in Black community has a function. But when you start perverting the effort of trying to make assumptions about what people's sexual behavior and activity is and all of these other things, like that's it's just gross, it's negligent, but it's also just getting out of hand by virtue of these identities that start to just say, like, you know, and people challenge me on this all the time, but like, you know, I showed up as a man, but I now consider myself a woman by virtue of, you know, body mutilation and going under the scalpel and this and the other. So I write about stuff like that, but I'm really like trying to sculpt it because my perspective isn't the only perspective that exists. So in areas where I'm still trying to understand, you know, this idea of what it means to, you know, become to have a trans experience, I want to make sure that I articulate that in a way that's still respectful and that does more good than harm, because I don't want to misspeak or misrepresent something in writing.
Correct.
And that forever be out there, and people are trying to glean how to function through that, and I've produced more dysfunction. I want what I produce to make things whole. I want that circle to be unbroken and for Black culture to be healed and whole as a result of what I produce. So Ayo Sakai stays on me all the time about getting stuff written and done. So trust you will see a brief out there from me soon enough. I am working on my own book. It's probably going to be a spin on the 1970s film Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Okay.
What we now are finding are circumstances where white people are trying to carbonate their skin by making it more melanated. And so eventually what you will see are these mulattoes walking around, and they will look like they are Black, but they will have white consciousness. And so it'll be hard to really say that somebody is being racist in the context as we know it by virtue of Black and white. It will not be Black and white. It will be Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And so white consciousness will exist in what appears to be Black bodies, which means you've got to be able to discern behavior and rhetoric to figure out where are folks really culturally oriented in order to know who you really dealing with. And so that is a book that I'm working on. The manuscript is almost finished. I will hopefully be begging Ayo Sakai to publish it under Universal Right Publication. And so that's it. Otherwise, people can just, Google me, send me a message anywhere. Like, it's not too difficult to find me. I'm at City College of San Francisco. I'm the Dean of English, Humanities, World Languages and Culture, and Communication Studies. I'm a pretty friendly guy. Please don't call me Ken. I really hate that. I'm KenZoe, or I'm Brian, or I'm KenZoe Brian, or I'm Dr. Selassie-Okpe. But I welcome the opportunity to just rap with anybody that's just about promoting a healthy, functional, whole context of Black culture for Black people throughout the diaspora, whether you in Africa or descended from being in Africa into other places, spaces, times, dimensions. However you want to find yourself, I'm with it.
I know that's right. Well, again, it is, 8:51 my time, so that now I guess it's a little bit later there with you. It's about, 5:51? Somewhere down there is about 5:51. It's close to 6 a.m. over there on the West Coast time, close to 9 a.m. here. But I thank you so much. We made the interview happen. A couple minutes here, there. I'm fine with it, especially since we were dealing with 2 different time zones, and we still got it in. We still did what we. So I appreciate the fact that you rose early and the topics were right on point. I laughed a couple of minutes ago when you said, please don't call me Ken, because see, that would kick off a whole nother discussion in terms of culture as well. And so, I was telling my wife this the other day, James become Jim, Robert is Bob. That's then like an automatic, whether you gave the permission or not. It's like, oh, wait, whoa. No, I'm James. I'm not Jim. But that's a whole nother discussion, and I'm running out of time. But enjoy.
Yeah, I'm not Ken. In my flattest white voice possible, I'm not Ken. I'm KenZoe. Oh, y'all make KenZoe. KenZoe Brian. That's who I am.
So, yeah, that'll be a whole nother discussion, but we'll be in touch. The interview is recorded. I'll be putting it up again on my YouTube channel. The other board members will be joining me over the next couple of weeks. I think next week is Allison, and the week after her is Cheyenne, and the week after her is Angelica. So I will have gone through most of the board members, if not all of them, before it's all over. But thrilled to talk to you as always. Keep on keeping on, as my mom can say. Again, my guest this morning was Dr. KenZoe Brian J. Selassie-Okpe. And we've
Absolutely.
had, again, a wonderful conversation. And again, he's giving you all his contact information. And again, he's really not that hard to find. If you put in KenZoe in Google, he'll pop up. Ken, capital Z-O-E, capital Ken, capital Z-O-E, and Brian J. Selassie-Okpe. So, all right, man, maybe you get a chance to go back to sleep and take care of that cold or what have you. And again, thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right.
Now, everybody have a good day.
All right, take care.